is Angela Acosta, and I am the health educator at Cal Maritime. This podcast is a new series about opening up the dialogue about health and wellness on campus. At first, the conversations sound a bit awkward, but let's embrace that process. Our goal is to build a safe platform where cadets can be heard and talk about what's on their mind around health. And that takes time. For our first season, the peer health educators and the Resiliency peers will be getting to know some of our new administrators on campus. They will help you with what you need to know to navigate through and share some helpful tips to help you stay healthy and safe during this pandemic. I want to give a special thanks to Ryan Rodriguez in Career Services, who has stepped up to help facilitate and guide the peer health educators with these podcasts. So, without further ado, let me present our first interview guest, Dr. Kathleen Mcmahon, our new VP of Student Affairs with our peer health educators, Angelica Matos, Nate Bond, and Matthew Venegas.
All right, we're golden. Okay, so just to simply introduce the podcast. I mean, how would you like to be introduced, Dr. I'm sorry, I can't really see her.
VP. She's vice president.
Okay. Oh, VP McMahon.
VP McMahon,
yeah. Okay, so address you casually like VP in a way like that. But we just wanted to, extend a nice, welcoming invitation to let you know that we're working with Angeli under the peer health educators, and Ryan, who's I guess you could say he's kind of like a liaison of sorts, helping provide insight and, fellow information and advice. But most importantly, we just want to give you a platform to, speak your piece, introduce yourself, give yourself a formal yet informal hello to the student body.
Awesome. So you want me just to introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm Kathleen Mcmahon, and I started as Vice President of Student Affairs and Cadet Development in late July. And I came to Cal Maritime for a number of reasons, primarily because it's a real specialized, small residential campus with a real emphasis on leadership. And I've worked at both large and small and public and private institutions, but I found the smaller privates the most fulfilling, because in that way, somebody in my role can actually talk to students like you. And I can walk out my door and students are eating lunch and we can say hello and actually have a conversation and maybe even see each other the next day. There's this continuity in a small campus where people in my role can actually know the students, and you get to see them, grow and develop over 4 years. And it just feels more connected to me than a large school. And so I've worked at UCLA and Cal Poly and Boston University. So those are, some very big schools, but I really preferred the smaller residential. And leadership is also something that's really important to me. So when I was at UCLA, I developed a leadership program called the Bruin Leaders Project, and basically created it and founded it, and it's still alive and well. And it's really based on this premise that anybody can be a leader and everyone is a leader in their own circles, and that we're all citizen leaders and can make an impact. And I think that it's critical to be instilling that in young people so that they know that they have a role in making a difference no matter what position they hold. I think that's really relevant to a ship or the types of mariner organizations where, you could have a leader that's is stepping out of line. And if somebody doesn't step up and say something, you have a problem, and it could be life threatening, and there's a lot at stake. So anyway, I'm really passionate about leadership, and I love that it's infused in both the curricula and the co-curricular aspects here, and the core and ELP. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me.
Oh, wow. Well, it's certainly certainly an impressive resume, certainly an impressive work history, and I guess I guess if I wanted to add a little personal question, or not necessarily an informal question, but in your personal / professional opinion, which university would you say posed the most interesting challenges, given through whatever factors that you saw were the most, I suppose, prevalent in the sense, maybe the work and interpersonal relationships on campus between students and professors. Maybe it could be the environment. I understand that Boston College is over in New England, so I hear the winters over there can be as strong and harsh as the stories may be. But whereas UCLA, having being in Southern California, having a morally consistent weather, do you think that plays a role in like interpersonal relationships and leadership, like amongst the student body?
Well, I don't think weather does. East Coast, West Coast, there are definitely different cultures. I would say more my experience at like Cal Poly, where racial injustice was becoming a national issue. That was a really interesting thing to live through on a campus like Cal Poly, that it actually doesn't have like the history of student protests like UCLA and Berkeley, but it developed a lot of student activism while I was there. And that was really a beautiful thing to be part of. Seeing students really care deeply about the things that were going around about racial injustice and start to really have a voice around it. So that was
just to be clear. I'm sorry, just to be clear real quick, this was Cal Poly Obispo, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, San Luis Obispo. It's because to take a little small tangent, I'd heard I do have a classmate or a friend of mine who he's taking a journalism class. He's majoring in journalism over at Obispo, and he had studied a particular case in which I believe it was previous 5 to 7 years ago, very recent history, where in there was a particular event that occurred at a Halloween party where your insight on how there's kind of a not stunted activism, but there was a reduced presence in activism in the college in comparison to like other universities, where the student had put on like a provocative like costume. It was and he put on a provocative like racially based costume, but didn't understand, or from my understanding, didn't comprehend the racial and the racial implications involved with that. I don't know if you're familiar with that case or anything like that.
Absolutely, I'm intimately familiar with it. Yeah, there were a number of sort of racialized incidents in the spring of 2018 that happened one after another. That those Halloween pictures was one of them. There was a student who put on blackface as part of a fraternity Olympics event that went viral on social media, that actually made national news, New York Times. Yeah, that was and then we had student protests during our open house, like Accepted Students Day. And that was really the beginning of this really incredible student activism at Cal Poly that has really continued its momentum ever since. And, you mentioned that the student didn't know in that one about the Halloween costume. And, in a lot of this work, it needs to be developmental and educational, because unfortunately, people don't always come to college understanding the meaning of their behavior or their words. And it's really on us to educate and make sure that that they understand the impact of their behavior on others, and how that's changed over time. We're in 2020 and a little different now expectations than it was, say, in the millennial or when I went to college and, in the 1980s.
Yeah, no doubt. Matt, can I ask a question real quick for VP
Go
McMahon?
for it, my man.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely appreciate you you kind of bringing up that adaptability about really having to change with the times, right? And things like that. I really do appreciate that. Do you see any opportunity for growth, if you will, on maritime specifically in that regard, educationally, developmentally, as you were talking about? And if so, what would that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I see a lot of opportunity here. I'm aware that many of our majors are really intense, and there isn't a lot of extra room for, elective courses. But sometimes the best learning can happen when, you're forced to dig into a topic and learn the history of it, versus just from a workshop or something. So, there are some great courses here that explore that. And I think actually this, California legislature just passed the required ethnic studies requirement. And we do have some great classes here that fulfill that requirement. And so, those are opportunities to learn. I also think that, we've got some identity-based clubs and really helping those students, those cadets in those clubs, find their voice a little bit more here and be a little bit more empowered to have a presence on campus so that, it feels more inclusive than just sort of we all put our nose down and do our thing and everybody expects that we're all the same, because we're not all the same. None of us are the same. We all come from different backgrounds, different education, different experiences, different privileges. And it's important to give space for that and recognition of that. I also think, Nate, to your question, like the Edwards Leadership Program, leadership is about, you can't be a good leader unless you're inclusive, right? Because if you're just going to make decisions in a silo without gathering diverse perspectives, you're not going to make the best decision possible. You might be if you're lucky, but not most of the time. So I think, leadership is about learning the value of inclusion of all perspectives before decisions are made and having everybody in the room to have their voices heard.
No doubt. Thank you, VP.
I have does anybody else have any questions? I don't want to interject too quickly. Ryan, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. So VP, you were talking about kind of how you see everybody has at least some form of leadership within them. And then talking about at Cal Poly, how there's almost, there wasn't the history of student activism like there are at some other CSUs and UCs. How do you see as a staff member and an upper level staff member, kind of your role in, and being new here at Cal Maritime too, of kind of maybe not necessarily creating the activism, because that obviously has to come from the students per se, but whether not necessarily programming, but just your role in kind of maybe helping fostering a climate that is more inclusive, where students do feel feel comfortable to step up and stand up when they feel like they need to.
Yeah, I love that question, because that's really what I'm trying to do, is to talk in different spaces with cadets and say, tell me, what is your experience like, and be honest. And an example is I spoke with Becca, about the ASCMA meetings, and I'm like, Becca, this is your chance to talk to folks and really share, what's going on at the university, and also how maybe the cadets you're talking to feel about it, right? We had the student protest around the food issue the day we had the drive-by event up at PIAC. And I thought that was great, because clearly there was all this information swirling around about what's going on with dining, and it hit like a firewall, and it went up in flames. And the fact that the cadets came out and said, we demand to know was great, because then we sat down and had a meeting and we shared all the information. And, there was a plan for the dining advisory committee to be happening, but it hadn't been widely publicized yet. And it was like a catalyst for serious communication and transparency that needs to happen. Because if we're going to get to a good place with dining, we've got to have, cadet input. And I know we would have had it, and I trust the process here, but the fact that the cadets came out that day, with really loud concerns, it moved things much more quickly. There was a discussion, I think, that night about vegetarian options with the chef and protein at breakfast. And it was like non-negotiable at that point. It's like, what do you mean we don't have protein at breakfast on every breakfast, So I think, I'm in my role to, empower the students to have their voices and then to help work to problem solving so that we can create the best student experience here. And it's a little hard if you don't hear from the students, if you say, what's up? And it's like, fine, but then on a survey, they go grumbling. And so you have it in a survey, but it's much better to be like, tell me what you want and how we can improve. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think just kind of open-ended and just let you go. Cause your kind of cadet development is your mission. And so I think open dialogue is good. And I think that was good to be said of like questionnaires are good and you can fill all those out, but it's the back and forth when you are frustrated with something and being able to articulate it beyond a few sentences you put in a question box. Is really what get the juices, the creative juices flowing, the back and forth, and start coming to some ideas and stuff.
Yeah, and to work together, right? Like we've got a strategic enrollment planning effort happening, and there's a whole retention piece on the cadet experience, and we've got cadets on every one of those committees because we can't do this without cadets being part of defining who we are and what the experience should be like.
Excuse me, VP. Now, with that in mind, we have with this particular year, it goes without saying, but it should certainly be addressed that this is most definitely an atypical year, as opposed to what the traditional cadet experience used to be. So, or what the traditional cadet experience was previously thought of. So I want to ask you, your input, your idea on what it means to have self-leadership, especially now. Of course, it's already been we're already at this close to around the 60% point of this semester. So if students have essentially been perfecting or practicing this idea of self-leadership in a way that was initially not necessarily thrusted, but initially persuaded into the conversation of remote learning and everything. So I want to understand what your take is, and how would you address the student body on what are some key but effective tools for self-leadership, especially from a remote learning standpoint.
Especially for what?
Self-leadership in a remote learning environment, like remote learning stance.
So my daughter was learning remotely last spring and had the hardest time. She was trying to learn chemistry by herself. It felt like, I went in one night before an exam and she was in tears, and she was on YouTube on Chemistry 101. And I was just like, how can that be that you are resorting to teaching yourself on YouTube? And she was panicking. And so I have huge empathy for this experience that we're in, and also for our instructors, because they were thrust into it and are learning these new ways. So I think it's just not easy for anyone. But I guess in terms of your question around self-leadership, it's requiring that students have to be much more disciplined in terms of regulating their time and their schedules and their space and discipline around getting things done and pursuing faculty with questions and FaceTime, because from what I've heard, some faculty will have an office hour, but it's just like you can go or not go. And so there's no personal interaction between the student and the faculty member. And I think that's just a loss for a student. Like, I won't learn well that way. It'll be content that I may or may not absorb. So, and I also know, with some classes, if they're asynchronous, you could just do it once every 2 weeks or something, right? Like, or you go on and you listen to something, and then you listen to it when you feel like it, and then you read, and then you take an exam. My daughter has gone 2 weeks sometimes without going to this class. And I think that's crazy. I don't know how she's going to learn anything. And I'm telling her, I don't think that's a really smart way to do it, right? Because I don't know what she's going to take away. But that's the thing, is it leaves the autonomy up to the student. And that's a lot for young people who are, like, particularly first-year students who are learning how to manage their own time and their learning. And so I think it's complicated. But I would say, in terms of self-leadership, it requires a lot of discipline and asserting that if I'm going to get something out of this class, I'm going to need to put something into it and determine that on my own. Otherwise, I can kind of skate, in some classes, or fail like my daughter did. I mean, she didn't fail, but she didn't learn anything. And she said, I'm afraid to go into Chem 2 because even though I passed the class, I didn't learn anything. And that's a big waste of time and money.
I got another question. What, just off of what you just talked about, so I'm sure that you didn't expect to ever really have a job working in higher ed where you go into work only 3 times a week and there's nobody, like, there's only a small number of people on campus. So just like for you, what have you done in these last 6-7 months in working either a little bit at work or remotely, in terms of your own, like, self-resiliency to kind of keep persevering when it's like, shoot, right now the end in sight isn't till next fall. It's like this semester, next semester is going to be the same way. So what have you been kind of doing and learning about yourself in terms of resiliency?
Yeah, well, that question was really hot for me in the spring when I was working from home 5 days a week. And I found it extremely draining. And I was doing all emergency operations planning regarding COVID all day long. And those days I found that I had to take a long walk after work every day. I had to step away I would slam my computer down. Literally, it was sort of an act of departure, like getting in your car. And instead of driving home, I would grab my German Shepherd and we would take a walk, for an hour. And it was the only way I could stay sane. And I even said to my husband, I'm not here yet. I'm going on my commute now. And he'd see me leave the house with the dog because he'd want to talk to me. And I'm like, no. I need this before I can interact with anybody. But now, I'm on campus 4 days a week and I love that. Like this is why I'm in the work, right? Is to be on a college campus and interacting with people and students. And, but it is really hard. Like I miss that I can't have a big team meeting with my staff, and see their expressions in the same room, and same thing with students, that, the ASCMA meetings are actually fun because you get to see people's faces without masks on, and there's more freedom there. But I don't know. It's hard walking around with a mask on all the time. But little things I do, Ryan, is, if I'm just been in back-to-back meetings, I will just go walk along the waterfront, or I'll walk outside and find a group of cadets and say, what's for lunch today? that's sort of my opening line. It's totally stupid, but I'm actually curious what the food is like since I don't eat there. So I'm curious. And I also just want to strike up a conversation and be in daylight and talking to people again.
No fault. We got to go with the easy opening question sometimes just to get a response. So
yeah, and food is a good common denominator.
Always.
Definitely.
Everybody's eating lunch, no doubt.
Yeah.
If you were, if only you came to campus just a few semesters prior to this, you would have seen the interesting sort of rituals that go out throughout the weekday. Given the unique nature of Cal Maritime, and I'm a graduating senior, I was fortunate enough to spend first 3 years, on campus. It seems I don't know why it seems weird to say that because it shouldn't, but there were certain rituals in the sense that every noontime or every 10 a.m. to noontime, it would be around peak traffic during the dining center, during the eatery, the eating areas. There's the dining center, and then there's the Morrow Cove area. People that had that wanted to spend money or had a student account with I don't know what exactly I don't remember what the term was for the on-campus currency or the food credits. I don't really remember that, but it's almost like a Cal Maritime Disney bucks in a sense, where you would send that money is just for that bistro or for whatever upgrades you wanted at the Morrow Cove. But they were sort of junctions, meeting places for students to come together, and that it was outside of classes, and there were always places to sit and places where people would come together and congregate. It's certainly gone through many changes over the years, way before my time, but there used to be an effective student lounge where we also sold alcohol called Thirsty Thursdays. That was a neat little thing that kind of adapted into Alleyway Thursdays, where it was a nice intimate gathering, with live music, sometimes karaoke. And on a special day of the year, on the special days during the semester, almost as if the stars aligned, where we'd have Fluffy Thursdays along with Alleyway Thursdays. It just felt really special in a way. Hopefully, I'm optimistic. I can't speak on behalf of the executives on campus to see what their next moves are, but I think you're going to find that an especially intimate and especially memorable time when you see people congregating together, sharing, not the fact that the drinks are the important thing, of course, but you see this intimate gathering, and if you wanted, you could go and pet some dogs, very university as it may seem.
That sounds so nice. I cannot wait for that time. Yeah. So Matthew, can I ask you a favor?
Definitely.
So I want you to put that day, that Thursday with Fluffy Thursdays and the alley, into your best day at Cal Maritime event that's happening right now. That's part of Keel Hauler Week.
Keel Hauler Week, baby. Kickball.
All you got to do is fill out that form. Nate, do you have the form?
I do have the form. I can send that over to him.
Okay. So Matthew, I'm going to be looking for this because you just described something really special, and I could tell it really meant something to you. So if you could please put that into a best day at Cal Maritime, and I think that'd be really nice.
Definitely.
And I'll look forward to it happening for me.
All right. Yeah, well, happy to have you aboard, right?
So I think I have to tell you one more thing that we started with. I think, are we about to wrap up? So you're all peer health educators. And I started as a peer health educator at the University of New Hampshire. And I remember I did workshops around consent and sexual assault. And I just felt like if I led a workshop and one person came and learned one thing about how to take care of themselves, I had had a really successful day. And so I just want to thank you for what you do, because peers learn from peers much better than they learn from anywhere else, and what you do is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate
Thank
that.
you very much.
We appreciate that.
And I know it's hard because people don't always listen.
But it's that important, As you said, it is the type of thing where it's not calculus, where if you learn and you leave one thing, you know a lot about calculus, right? And like stuff like that. But this is so much more important than that. It's so simple. It's so foundational to getting along cohesively. You know what I mean? As a society. And I mean, if you can teach one person one thing, I mean, that's why we're all here. So thank you for that. We appreciate your recognition for that.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Well, Ryan, if you'd like to cut the recording up to this point or anything like that, unless if there's any other questions, if you want to wrap things up and give a big conclusion or a big thanks to VP over here, whoever wants to say anything. AJ, I noticed you've been a little bit on the quieter end this time, so I really want to hear your insight on this.
I don't really want to say it on recording, but I just want to thank you for introducing yourself, because I didn't really have a relationship with higher admin on campus. Like, the only thing that I got close to were the commandants, but every time I saw the commandants, I was running away because I always seemed to get in trouble. So I just avoided them. I didn't want a relationship with them because it was always something coming up. So I'm glad that I got to know you. So thank you for coming on and making me feel comfortable and making me feel welcomed at Cal Maritime with not getting in trouble.
Oh.
A lot of students feel that way. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would love to get to know you better, and it would help me here by knowing you and your experience and what brought you here and what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you.
Thank you.
I wanted to share my thoughts about this podcast with the peer health educators and Dr. McMahon. This podcast was recorded at the end of the workday. I can't imagine how many meetings Dr. McMahon has been through during the day. But when I was watching this podcast, I noticed how she listened and gave her full attention to the students. She truly cares and listens to our cadets. She wants to know your experience at Cal Maritime and learn how to make it better. Change doesn't happen overnight. She can help us problem solve and help us get to a solution. That's something that we need right now, and honestly, it feels refreshing. If you see Dr. McMahon, say hi and let her know what you had for lunch, or send her an email with your concerns and thoughts at kmcmahon@csum.edu. Till next time, be well, stay safe, stay healthy.